On today's episode, we are going to be talking about a warehouse in Grimsby. And apparently it's a two-state solution in Grimsby, the north and south, the good, the bad. But this property is 15,000 square foot. It's subject to 2 leaseholds and it has a whole heap of asbestos. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about what is available, what you can do, what you can't do, the type of person that would buy this. And at least Adam mentioned how much he would pay for this. So you need to stay and watch this because Adam is going to give you a masterclass on how to value a property that is listed for £1. At the end of this episode, you will be seeing the legal pack review and what this property sells for. So you have to watch to the end. Otherwise, you missed the whole point. So stay with us to the end and we'll see you in the next episode.
Today in this episode, we're going to discuss this freehold property offered for £1 in auction house, West Yorkshire auction. It's a property in Grimsby and it's quite substantial freehold block, and it's got about almost 15,000 square feet, and it's offered for sale with vacant possession via traditional auction sale, which is a little bit confusing because of the stuff that it says later. However, it's there are no viewings because of the presence of asbestos, and the incoming buyer will be liable for this. And then the property is subject to 2 separate leasehold titles, both of which are 99 years from 1955 and 1959. And there is ground rent £163 per annum. So
I think we'll take over from here because this is a viewer, subscriber suggestion.
Yes.
So we haven't said it for a couple of videos, but of course, if there is something that you see at auction that you think is really interesting, obviously that you're not willing to buy, that you think is really, really interesting, then send it through. We'll talk about it. So this one, he's happy to be named. Andy Wilkinson sent this one through and he said, these are the things I think that are really important to discuss. So without spoiling the game too much, he suggested 3 things. 1, obviously they've probably been quoted maybe 6 figures to remove the asbestos, which is probably why it's £1, right? The other thing he mentions is this site would work perfectly if it was split up and set up as separate sites, because once you resolve the asbestos issue, then you'll have multiple income coming from multiple tenants. And he made a point that I'm a big fan of making on things like this. You have land remediation tax relief on resolving asbestos issues. So that's a jumping platform. What do we think?
Well, I think the last point is one that sprung to mind. I think if I was adding anything onto that, I'd also say Grimsby is not in West Yorkshire, which I always find quite interesting. And there are other places that it could have been.
Are you sure?
I'm 100% certain it's in North East Lincolnshire.
It is.
I do have property there, and I know it. I know it well. So that's always there's a little question mark as to why that's happened as well. I suspect you're probably right. Someone's looked at an asbestos removal quote and said that's more than it's worth.
Yeah.
So it depends on the position you're in. Going back to starting with the last point, the land remediation relief as it is, 150% tax relief.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, worthwhile, but worthwhile if you're making a profit. Mm. So if this was your first deal, it might not be the right way to start out necessarily, because if you were making a regular profit year on year in an SPV and thought, right, great, okay, so I can factor in that rather large tax credit. Remember, it's 150% of the tax on what you've spent, not 150% of the tax. Otherwise, everybody could do it and reclaim money.
Yeah, and it's only applicable to corporations, limited companies, rather than private individuals.
Very important
and you can
to note
spread
as well.
that relief over a number of years.
You can carry it forward, absolutely. But if you're already making a profit, it's much easier for you to amortise it. It's a bit like people sometimes get trapped with capital allowances and things like that, and they sound fantastic. But if the company wasn't making a profit for whatever reason, perhaps you're halfway through a big development and you've got big losses on the books or whatever, is it worthwhile having that money in 2 or 3 years' time? But if you're in a position where you're already making a profit and you've got this sort of stuff, I think there's been some good points raised. That the idea of the old CMO, the commercial of multiple occupancy or whatever. There's a lot of bricks there. What's the rebuild value of that building? Thick end of £3 million probably or something by the sounds of it. in this day and age. So awful lot of bricks there if you had need for it. And I think if you can find what works in the local area, obviously it's pretty industrial around there.
Yeah.
It's also very variable. If you know Grimsby at all, there are definitely Lower Grimsby and Upper Grimsby. I'll keep the real names out of it just to avoid offending anybody who does anything in Grimsby. But there are definitely two. It's definitely a place of two halves.
It's not a two-tier city, surely.
It probably will be if it isn't already. But that obviously needs bearing in mind. But if you can, in these sorts of buildings, if you can add value with something that the communal tenants would want, they wouldn't get somewhere else. And I'm not necessarily coming up with what the answer to that might be just yet. But if you can see an angle there into what's needed, for example, if it was the fish market that needed servicing, right, picking on the fact that it's Grimsby, then what would help? What would help? Easy access to ice. I don't know, but there might be something in there for that reason. So, and it might not be that land remediation relief is the only tax relief that can be claimed.
Probably not
as well.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. That there might be some other, because it's one of the offshore hubs, isn't it, for the energy sector and all of what we do in terms of renewables and stuff. So you'd imagine that there will be other businesses that will be growing or maybe wanting to relocate. So I know Young's had to shut down one of their premises up there, but they were moving some bits back into the port. So whilst it might not be them that come in, there's probably a load of other businesses there. And I think there were some big grants that had gone in as well. I think there was one locally, was about 8 million quid had gone in. So you'd hope that maybe with it being a hub and all that kind of stuff.
Is Grimsby one of the free ports that they brought up? It
was.
Yeah.
The thing that worries me with those, of course, is how much enthusiasm the new government has for pushing forward what was the previous government's idea. And we've seen that, for example, solar panels were actually quite a good setup before 2010. But when Conservatives came in, way back then, they decided that the solar panel feed-in tariffs needed destroying and the whole industry sort of died overnight, which was a big shame, because that might have helped us out quite a bit in the old winter of 22.
Or indeed the winter of 2024, which is going to be rough for a few people, one would imagine.
Well, yeah, maybe.
But also it's understanding the tools of the game, right? Not everything requires a hammer. So whilst land remediation is one tool, you may just be able to... there are techniques where you can actually seal it in and do other things where you don't actually have to remove it, you just make it safe. Yeah. So your 100,000 or six-figure removal cost now goes down to a far smaller number. So that may be a way to...
I think asbestos is all about management, right?
Yeah.
And knowing where it is and for it not to be disturbed.
Yeah.
Because it's only problem if the asbestos is disturbed.
If it gets a bit dusty, it's problematic.
Yeah.
Well, and what it is as well. What it is a big deal, isn't it, realistically? But like you say, if it can be sealed, if it can be contained, if there's an asbestos management plan, not necessarily a wholesale removal or anything like that, you could really do with trying to get to the owner, couldn't you, realistically? And seeing what you can find out.
You're going to assume it's probably the roof or something, isn't it? In a building like that, that's going to...
It's got the look and feel of it on the roof. Why?
So, Jessica, you said you're interested in investing in commercial property. Is this one of those?
I actually think this one looks quite nice, actually, to be honest. If I was a bit closer, I might go and have a look or chat to some other people. Mm-hmm. I think this kind of stock's interesting, but again, it's like, who's going to come into that? So... Who's your tenant going to be? If there's tons of vacant premises around there, then it's not really a goer, is it?
Hi, I'm Michael Alison. I'm the Commercial Director at Roma Finance, and I'm delighted to tell you that Roma Finance have the Flow Bridging range, which is specifically designed for those fast completions, which will come in handy when you're looking at purchasing a property at auction. If you want to know more, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you.
I think it's obviously we don't have the legal park right now, which is the key thing in this property. Like, even though the price looks good, even though we might know about the tax credits and stuff, without the legal park, no one is taking any risk, especially with those two leasehold titles.
Correct. Yeah.
And because if there's a leasehold title, those tenants, leaseholders, have the right to be there until 2054, 2058. It's quite a while, 20-30 years.
And didn't it say that I think the local council had to give permission to those lease assignments or something? There's something sort of alluded to, but obviously we can't see that.
Yeah, that's right. It says that please note North East Lincolnshire Council has stipulated certain conditions for it to provide consent to the assignment of the leases. Please refer to the legal pack, which is
isn't there. How helpful. It's also interesting, isn't it? It's the leases were signed 1 year and 5 years after the Landlord and Tenant Act 1954. So there's also the 54 Act to be considered in the non-existent legal pack that we're discussing.
Yeah, this is a bit of guesswork, but it was interesting enough with the issues that affect it, its location potential. It will very much require the right type of buy. You know, we've said this before. A £1 guide is a bait price, and potentially in this situation, it's not as baity as some of the others. Because if you do have to address removing all of the asbestos or doing things like that, then £1 doesn't sound bad.
I think this kind of price it's not baity, it's inviting.
It's inviting.
Inviting of consideration. What this could be worth to someone.
It just gives the value an easy job, right?
Yeah. The question is, who does it invite? People that are aware of what they need to evaluate, what they need to understand. That's a bigger thing.
It invites everyone. That's the thing. It's a broad invitation.
It's indiscriminate.
It depends if there's a buyer's premium of £5,000 on the lot, apart from anything else, which is something you need to look out for on these.
Again, the legal pack will give us a heads up there.
Can't wait for said legal pack.
Yeah, I think this is a really good example of how like a property can look good, but without the legal pack, we can't say really much about it because it could be a great deal, it could be an awful deal. And
what we may have to do is we'll wait for the legal pack to come out, and then afterwards we'll do another recording, or probably just Piotr will do another recording, just running through the legal pack to say, were we right here, were we wrong there, and then we'll probably post it with some more, with some better kind of detailed responses,
and the actual results of this auction as well, because sometimes people, we got this quite a few times where people watch the recording that we do now. And then they don't watch till the end, and they give the prediction of what the property might sell for. And we actually say at the end of most of the videos what the property has sold for. So guys, make sure you watch till the end. And so we're gonna review the legal pack. We're gonna reveal what the property sold for and whether we think it was a good deal or not.
But in the room, who would buy this and at what price?
Well, you know, 16.
You're making enough profit to get a sideways loss, aren't you?
16.3% yield might be workable, you know, so maybe it's worth £1,000 with no other fees attached. But if that's all the legals are going to cost, then I've got to pay some stuff for the buyer. I'm probably maybe £2. Maybe just second bidder, maybe. I mean, I think you need to want it, don't you? And it needs to fit somewhere. It can't be a speculative thing, because it's the sort of thing where it's a great thing to talk about, because there's lots and lots of examples there that you can apply in assessing other lots and things like that, and a few interesting things going on that I think sometimes do get missed. You know, when you see quite a few lots where there's maybe 18 to 36 months left on a lease somewhere, where there's considerations of things like dilapidations. Nobody wants it because they don't want to wait 18 months to develop it, because it starts to mess with their figures. But actually there's a lot of rent passing. I've seen some good stuff recently where they're yielding 20-30% on holding, and it's like, well, on holding profits like that, you can afford holding costs, can't you? That's the thing. So you can apply a lot of the stuff that we've just talked about, I think, to a lot of other slightly quirky lots, and that's where the value is here.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Okay, well, thank you guys for your comments on this lot, and we'll follow with the next section in a second. Okay guys, so this was a super exciting auction. We're actually going to start by playing you the auction as it was happening a few days ago, and then afterwards we're gonna review quickly the legal pack, and we're gonna quickly look at the history of this property. And you guys tell me, is this property a deal or is this property not a deal? Let's go.
Which takes us now on to lot 31. So this is Compass House over on Rigby Street in Grimsby, substantial industrial unit, and we haven't been in, but we believe it totals just shy of 15,000 square feet. Heart of Grimsby Docks, offered with vacant possession. It's a leasehold, as you're aware. I haven't been in, so there's not a lot I can say about it other than that. But hopefully you've done all your research. You tell me where we go with this. The telephone bids have started. I'm going to kick things off at 5,000, so maybe 4, looking for 5, if that's all right, Chris. So £5,000, have we got any bids? At £4,000, looking for 5. Thank you, £5,000. The head sounded quite firm at £93,000. Then to you, Mr. S, for the first time, second time, third and final time at £93,000. Sold. Well, I think you deserve that. Congratulations. Well done.
Okay, nice one, guys. So as you can see, that property sold for £93,000 after some pretty intense bidding. And when I looked at the history of this building as well, this building actually sold almost 30 years ago for £284,000. It was also a leasehold factory warehouse. It was rented at the time at £32,000 per annum, and it was probably in a much better condition. So this £93,000 doesn't sound as bad, even though there's substantial work to be performed. But for the right company, probably isn't a bad thing. But we also looked at the legal pack of this property. So this is all the documents that were available in this legal pack. And as you can see, there were about 25 or so documents. Many of them were title documents, sort of licenses to be signed, but there was also some replies to inquiries, which is not a usual thing for administrators to provide, because this was being sold by administrators. There's this asbestos survey and a few other documents relating to the building, the EPC, and special conditions. And we used this beta service from our friends at DocuWise, and this is a new platform that will be providing legal pack summaries for auction lots. And basically this is using AI to provide a summary of all the documents that are available and the kind of things to take into account when having a first look at the property and deciding whether this is something worthwhile taking to solicitors and investing into, or whether all those information, the actual summary, will provide enough information to say, okay, this is not for us, we'll move on. And let's look what this software provided us with. So this property, as the title was, property was owned by Cook and Lucas Frozen Holdings Limited, company administration. The property is leasehold, which we knew, and it's comprising of this title and also another title on this property. And you could see the lease plans and the terms of those leases. Then basically the additional fees that need to be payable and planning. So it basically, there was no recent planning permission, but as we could see from the history of the building, it's always been used as some sort of factory warehouse. And the important things to consider, obviously, the property's administration status. So it would be the administrative status of the actual company, the lack of detailed information on service charges, which I guess in here there wouldn't be many service charges. Ground rent, there was a document providing us with ground rent arrears and saying that those arrears will be paid off. And then the rent reviews and presence of asbestos, which is the thing that we highlighted in our video. So those were the things to kind of consider, but the legal pack didn't look too bad. It had all the information required to make informed choices, and obviously the property requires lots of work. So this would probably be suitable for a company that does some trade, that needs that kind of premises near a port. And but you tell us, do you think at £93,000 this is a deal, given that this property sold for £284,000 30 years ago? What kind of buyer could buy this property? Would you buy this property? And if so, what would you do with this? I'm pretty sure people have some weird and wonderful ideas of what to do with such a big, massive warehouse. So let us know in the comments what you think, and if you bought this property, also let us know what your plans are, what to do with it. Thanks, guys. See you in the next episode.